Tashitale, welcome to the AWAM Tibetan Buddhist Institute and our Sunday Heart Essence Tibetan Buddhism. We are in class number 12, and so welcome back. Let us begin by taking a deep breath and then slowly letting it out. We'll do that for 3 times. And so just calming your mind with a sense of deep peace. And so we begin then with our refuge. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we're continuing with chapter 12 in the textbook on the second training in the path of tantra, which is meditation. And so we're continuing now with the uncommon preliminaries, which we had started before. Recall that the common preliminaries included the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, and those include impermanence, karma, death, and precious human life. And then the uncommon, the one that we are focused on right now, include refuge in bodhicitta, which we did first, and then also the idea of liberation, from the idea of bodhicitta, the liberation from all kinds of sufferings that we may experience, and attain liberation and enlightenment. And so now today we're going to the Vajrasattva. So this is the 3rd of the 5, and this is a purification of those sufferings. And so we basically are washing those away from our body, from our mind, and so forth. So let's begin. One way to get rid of that negative karma previously acquired is to burn them up. And that way is a negative experience that we have in our lives. We don't want to do that if we can help it. But karma is impermanent. So we do not have to wait for that to happen. We do that through purification practices, and the most significant of those is Vajrasattva in the Tibetan tradition. So the Buddha of purification. We do this to purify all negative karma, afflictive emotions, cognitive obscurations, and habitual tendencies that prepare us for ourselves as suitable vessels to advance practices. So this is one of the first yidam practices that is traditionally taught in Tantric Buddhism. Yidam practices may be quite simple or very complex. We will explore the more complex ones a little bit later. So we'll be beginning with the more simple kind of approach, which makes it easier in the beginning. Now we are ready to take the next step. The basic pattern of the short practice is, first of all, an opening refuge prayer. It's very common. Visualization of the yidam. Usually it's a description of the particular figure. And then a recitation of the mantra. And then dissolution and meditation on emptiness. So we dissolve all of that into what is referred to as emptiness. And then finally, there are usually some closing prayers. So those 5 characteristics are the most common ones that are used in these kinds of practices. Now, they can be much more complex than that. Some short practices include other kind of elements, for example, such as offerings or additional mantras or prayers and so forth. And that's fine too. It's just adding in and enhancing the particular practice that is being done. So you may also find contradictions between practices at times, even with the same yidam figure. So in any case, it's best to follow the description of the practice text or the sadhana that you're using, which may vary from one to another for the same yidam figure. So just follow whatever the particular one is that you are using at the time. And then today, the practice text is chanted, even memorized for that purpose. However, this may not have been the case in India and early Tibet. There is some evidence, for example, practitioners would memorize the basic structure of the process, then reflect on the meaning involved in that structure, and then do visualizations while reciting only the mantras. This approach also supports the approach articulated in the 4 reliances that we looked at in chapter 3. After some opening prayers, the sadhana will give a brief or very detailed description of the yidam figure, which may include the surrounding environment, the palace, and the yidam, sometimes with additional surrounding figures. So there's variety of the way that these are done. It is easiest to begin with a photo of the yidam. You may copy and print photos of personal use from the internet, for example. Best done if you want to print those out to do it on photo paper, but it's not really necessary. Just look at the photo and then read the description in the sadhana. So it is okay if the photo is not an exact match. That's very common. There's various, usually subtle kinds of differences from one to another, but there are those differences. And so if the photo that you're using doesn't exactly match the text that you're using, don't worry about it. That's okay. More detailed approaches call for memorization of the image, sometimes a great detail, but in our approach, based on the great perfection view, that is not necessary. A brief flash glance is all that's really needed. So you just look at it real quickly so you get the image in your mind, and then you continue on with whatever is the part of the text. So each of the significant yidams in the tradition has a mantra that is recited during the practice. The Mani is a simple and beautiful example of that. That's the word that is used typically for this particular example. Om Mani Padma Hum. So Mani means jewel, and Padma is lotus. And so the mantra of compassion, and it is associated with Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion. There are multiple levels of symbolic meaning in this simple mantra as well. At one level, for example, a mantra is symbolic of the name of the yidam, though not in a literal translation. It is, in this example, some say that the wish-fulfilling jewel is the innate Buddha nature within us. We've talked about this previously, that we all have this innate Buddha nature in us. And the lotus is a beautiful flower that grows out of the mud. And so it symbolizes our obscurations. It's down below the water, it grows up, and this beautiful flower then emerges as a part of that. And so that's the symbolic representation involved here. In addition, the 6 syllables symbolically purify the 6 negative emotions. So that's an additional or a different option in understanding. So anger, greed, ignorance, desire, jealousy, and pride. They also symbolically represent the 6 perfections of the enlightened mind, of generosity, virtue, patience, persistence, meditation, and wisdom. So the 6 perfections. So there's different ways that those 6 elements can be considered in terms of the symbolic representations of them. So Om consists of 3 letters. This, of course, comes from the Indian language, and so Sanskrit, and so it is said to have an A or an A letter, and then a U or a U letter, and an M. So Om, Om, Om. It comes. The symbolizes both our impure body, speech, and mind, and the Buddha's pure body, speech, and mind. So from another perspective, the mani, or jewel, symbolizes the altruistic intent to become enlightened, as well as loving kindness and compassion, the masculine principle, while Padma, lotus, symbolizes wisdom, which is the realization of suchness or emptiness, the feminine principle. So we have both the masculine and the feminine that are a part of that. Now, that doesn't mean a male and a female per se, but those principles associated with those. And finally, Hum refers to the indivisibility of non-dual nature of compassion and wisdom. And so thus, the union of compassion and wisdom can transform our impure body, speech, and mind into pure body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. So that's what's going on here behind the scenes, so to speak. So you can find various kinds of translations of the mantra that we're going to be using here for Vajrasattva as well. It is referred to as the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. And you can find various examples of that on the internet. The translations vary from one to another as a part of that. But here's the one that I first learned. Going through it with the words associated with that in the Tibetan language and then, or Sanskrit. Generally, they're similar or the same, but they can vary a little bit. And along with an explanation of each of those. So it begins with the Om that we were just referring to. It refers to the idea of the most excellent exclamation of praise. And this is followed by Benzasato Samaya, which is Vajrasattva's commitment to the vow. Benzasato is Vajrasattva, so sometimes it's actually written that way, but other times in the Tibetan language, it's Benzasato. So Benzasato Samaya, Samaya means the vow or commitment that's being made. Manupalaya, Benzasato, so we have, O Vajrasattva, protect the commitment, the promise that we're making or he has made for us as well. And then Tempa Tisha Drito Meba Wa, may remain firm in me. Now I want to point out one thing that happened just there. So the words that are used here, Manupalaya and then Benzasato, it's actually Benzasato Tempa. So it's divided in terms of the meaning of that in the middle of that one part of the text, and then continues on to Tishtadrito Mebawa. So we get, by adding that second part of that, the Tempa, Tishtadrito Mebawa. So that's, may you remain firm in me. And so we're asking Vajrasattva to come into us and remain in us and to protect us from any kind of negative kinds of actions that we might engage in otherwise. And then Sutokayo Mebawa, grant me complete satisfaction. Supokayo Mebawa, increase the positive within me. Enables us to then be more effective. And then Anu Rakto Mebawa, be loving toward me. And Sarvasiddhi Me Prayat, grant me all the cities, the powers associated with this. Sarma Karma Sutame, show me all the activities, the ethics and practices associated with doing this. So this would be the sadhana practice that we're referring to, but it also more broadly refers to all sadhana practices that we may do. And then Sittam Shriyas Kuru, make my mind good, wholesome, and auspicious. So we want our mind to be able to effectively recognize and apply these things into our mind and into our practice. So we make my mind good, wholesome, and auspicious. Then we continue with Hong. The syllable Hong is the heart essence seed syllable of Vajrasattva. Each of the yidam practices, yidam figures, has a particular one. And in this particular case here, I've got an image I can show you here. So this is Om Ah Hong, and so this is the Hong, the blue one, down here at the bottom, so you can see how that is figured. And you can get copies of that from the internet. You can even print them out if you would like to do that. And so that is one that is very common as a part of that. That's, again, the heart essence seed syllable of Vajrasattva. Each of the yidam figures has one of those, and sometimes they have the same ones, but sometimes they also have different ones. And then it continues on with the four ha's. Ha, 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 ha. The four immeasurables, the four empowerments, the four joys, the four kayas, and so forth. So that those four, the four has, if you will, have been used in many different ways to reference different sets of four things. And so those are included there, and the four immeasurables, the four empowerments, the four joys, and the four kayas are among the more common ones. And then Ho, we end that with the Ho. This is an exclamation of joy, as well as accomplishment, or rejoicing at having accomplished this. So Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata, oh, all the blessed Tathagatas. Tathagatas means Buddhas. And then Benza Mame Munsa, may I be fully liberated in the Vajra transcendent, which is transcendent wisdom. Vajra here is reference to that transcendent wisdom or insight into the nature of things. And then Benzi Bhawa, grant me the realization of the Vajra nature, which is the Buddha nature. And then finally, Mahasamaya Sato Ah. Oh, great Vajrasattva. So we're wrapping it up with that kind of statement. So this is usually one of the first mantras memorized by new tantra practitioners, as regularly used for purification in daily rituals. So we do this, and so doing them over and over again, it's very common for us to memorize those. In addition to Vajrasattva practices as being described here, it is helpful to listen to a recording. So you can find recordings of this online, and you can download that and use that while you are reciting your mantras. And that can be very helpful as a way of making sure to pick up the sounds and the memorization of the words and so forth as a part of that. And so they're also available for other kind of mantras as well, when you move on to those. So it's very helpful to listen to a recording. It can really enhance your memorization process as part of that. So there are both musical and chanted recordings that may be played over and over as a part of the learning. So sometimes they just do a regular chant, Om Mani Padma Hum. That's not the Vajra one, but one of the short ones that we use that I illustrated a little bit earlier, but it can also be sung. Om Mani Padma Hum, Om Mani Padma Hum, and so forth. So there's both ways of doing that. Whatever works for you and you find helpful is very important. And then for lay practitioners, lamas sometimes permit doing a shorter version of the 100-syllable mantra. Sometimes maybe you do one or three of the long ones, and then you do the short one, which is Om Benzasato Ah, or Om Vajrasattva Ah. And so in general, the short mantra is recited 600,000 times as opposed to doing the long mantra 100,000 times in terms of the tradition. It's a lot easier in that sense to be able to do the short one, even though the number of repetitions is much longer. It's quicker to go through all of those. So as before, I recommend for lay practitioners to do as many repetitions as you can during your 2 daily sessions for 1 week, or you can also include other kinds of things as a part of that. Or you can, if you're breaking your practice into more sessions, for example, you can also break the mantra into various sessions as a part of that. And then continue as a part of the daily practice. And this goes on in this approach for the rest of your life. So instead of committing to a specific number, we're committing to a particular practice. So we're going to continue to do these every day, if at all possible, for the rest of our life. And that's my approach. Even though I went through the 100,000 for each of these, I also have committed to doing it every day as a part of my practice. And I have found that to be very beneficial as a part of my practice, and hopefully it could also be for you. So the mala, or rosary, as a string that's used, and you may have one of these, or you may have seen them. Buddhists often have them, and they're wrapped up around their arms and so forth. But this is one of the things that it's used for these countings. Now, it's actually 108 beads. This end up here, there's a little bit larger one at the top. And so that's referred to as the guru bead. So when we're counting, we start on one side of that, and we hold it over our hand, over the finger, and then count it by pulling one bead at a time as we recite and go on. So doing that, Om Binzasattva, Om Binzasattva, Om Binzasattva, Om Binzasattva, and so forth. And we go through the entire ring of beads until we get back to the guru bead. But we don't go over it. We flip it around and go the other direction back through these. So that's part of the tradition, and so that's one of the things that can be helpful to you in your way that you view the idea of the guru as a part of your commitment and what you are doing is in that. So in addition to that, one of the things we do is that we're doing this, as I said, for 100,000 times, or if you are doing that, because you don't necessarily have to do that, do as many as you can for a week, and then go ahead and just continue the daily practice continually. But if you're going to do 100,000, one of the ways to do that with the mala, you do that, and each mala, even though it has 108 beads, the 8 beads are just in case. So maybe you made a mistake or something like that. But a mala basically is counted as 100. And so it can be very helpful to pick up one of these little devices. There's electronic versions of them as well now. And then you just put it on your other hand, finger, and then whenever you complete one, you just click and then keep track of those. And you don't have to mentally, you don't have to write something down and so forth. It can be very helpful as a useful technique to help you do the counting part of this. So in conjunction with the Vajrasattva practice, you also include something called the 4 powers. And so the 4 powers are the power of remorse or regret. So you regret and feel remorse for your past misdeeds, and we recall those as a part of this. You actually take some time to think about, what are some of the things that I have done that were wrong or harmful to someone else and so forth. And then we regret having done those. And then the second one is the power of the antidote. So having done those, we want to deal with that. And so that is the practice It becomes the antidote to those misdeeds. And then the third one is the power of resolve, the commitment. So we're committing not to repeat those misdeeds. And then number 4 is the power of reliance or support. We continue to rely on the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha for support, for our refuge as a part of this. And in this particular case, viewed as in the context of Vajrasattva being the support for us. And so these may be included in actual sadhana text. Some include it, and the one that we're going to use does, which is one of the reasons that I like this particular text. But otherwise, it should be inferred as if it is already there. So we contemplate the remorse or regret prior to the visualization, if not included in the sadhana text. So sometimes it's not there. In that case, we just take a little bit of time before we start the actual practice. The text below includes this step. Then after the visualization and mantra recitation, we rest in a natural state. We meditate, okay? So we dissolve the visualization that we have created, and that goes into just emptiness. So a natural state that is abiding in the transcendent wisdom or non-conceptual experience. In the beginning, we imagine being in this state. We do that by resting naturally without thoughts, as we did in the previous shamatha meditation, but without an object of focus. So there's not a physical object like we often do use in mindfulness practices, but we go beyond that now. We let go of that, but just a state of pure awareness itself. Now, later we'll go into that in more detail. With practice, this transcends our imagination, and we are able to abide for longer periods without effort. This is described in some detail in the chapter on wisdom, which we'll get to in a few weeks. One final but important point that I like to mention here, there are many different texts that sound as if karma is permanent and that you will suffer the consequences of your actions no matter what. That's not the tantric point of view on this. So this is rather fatalistic and deterministic as an approach that ignores this and other purification processes. So that's not the way that we approach this. Rather, we're looking at karma as being impermanent. Okay? It can be changed. It can be purified. And that's the point of doing this kind of a practice. Accordingly, it can be purified, knowing this is critical to successful practice. As you do this practice, really know that it is purifying all negative karma. So, context before we go through this again, just a reminder, the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, everything is impermanent. There's karma and activities or actions exist, and death is inevitable in human form, and then preciousness of human life. So those 4 are very important. The uncommon ones are the refuge, vows that we take and so forth, the bodhicitta, the mind of liberation and enlightenment, and now today going into the Vajrasattva practice here, purification. And so again, their standard guideline here is to do twice daily for 1 week. If you could work more than that in, do that. Ideally, we do the long version of this, but we can also do the short version as a part of that. Set your intention. I do this practice for the benefit of all sentient beings, or if you have a more specific intention for yourself, that's fine also. And then the refuge vow, this one has a particular refuge vow. We recite it 3 times. It says, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So again, we recite that 3 times. Then we get to the actual visualization of this. So above the crown of my head, so visualized up above here, I visualize a white lotus on a moon disk seat. So the flower there in the moon disk would be like a disc shape. It's white with a lotus. And then on this is the syllable Hum that I showed you before, which transforms into a Vajra with a Hung in its center. And then the Hung then transforms into Vajrasattva and Vajratopa in the essence of our own root lama. Now I want to show you a picture here. This is an image of the two, Vajrasattva and Vajratopa, together. Now a lot of times it's only Vajrasattva, but in this case it shows the two of them together, which is fairly common in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but not exclusive. So if you have two or one, either one is satisfactory. And then Vajrasattva is brilliant, luminous, white in color, youthful, and long black hair is gathered on top of his head, and the rest is curling down his back and around his shoulders. So he's got hair up here at the crown, but then it also goes back and then goes around to the side of his shoulders as a part of that. And then the rest is curling around the shoulders, and then in his right hand he holds a golden Vajra at his heart center. So Vajra is one of these, and so he holds it at his heart, and you can't quite see it there, down at his heart as a part of that. And if he has his consort, then it would be around at her back as a part of that. And so at the center of the Vajra is the Hung syllable. So the center here would be at this point. And so the Hung syllable is visualized at being there. And then light radiates out in all directions from the rotating mantra to all of the Buddhas. And so this is at the center, and then there's a disc down below it. So we have a disc down below that and a lotus flower below that. And so then this radiates out together from all of that. And so then they are pleased, and they then return their blessings back to us in the form of light, which is absorbed into the mantra at Vajrasattva's heart center. So at his heart center, now he's still above us at this point, increasing its brilliance. Light fills his body completely, enhancing the magnificence of his appearance. So then I and all sentient beings, deluded by our ignorance, regret our negative actions. So this is the first of those 4 reliances. I regret that. So at this point, with this particular text, you wouldn't do it before you start, you would do it at this point and recall the kind of things that you have done in the past which have a negative kind of an action effect to it. So negative or bad karma. O Lama Vajrasattva, holder of the Vajra, please purify us. So we're requesting that he purify all of these negative experiences we have had that result in negative karma. Nectar produced from the mantra syllables flows from the place of union of Vajrasattva and Vajratopa. So now this comes down, we have Vajrasattva and Vajratopa above us, and this comes down through our crown and into our heart. It purifies through the crown my body, and then all obscurations and negative karma as a part of that. It flows down through my throat, so all obscurations and negative karma of speech. So body, speech, and then
It continues down to my heart center. All obscurations and negative karma of my mind are purified. And so this is body, speech, and mind. So in Buddhism, we think of mind as being at the heart level instead of at our head, the way we do in the West. And then these obscurations are expelled in the form of a smoky, dark liquid through the pores of our skin, the lower openings of our body, as we are filled with nectar and completely purified. So we just visualize this coming down through our entire body and coming out. And so what remains is completely purified. And so we recite the mantra as many times as we can while continuing the visualization. This is the second of the four reliances. It's the mantra recitation. And so here we would recite the long one, or we would recite the slow one, either one. If I'm doing a shorter one, I usually like to do at least one of the longer version, and then I will go to the shorter version following that. So you keep that in mind as a part of this. And then as you recite this, all negatives flow out through the pores and lower openings of your body. And then the third one, I resolve never to perform these negative actions again. So we looked at what they were, we recognized them, and then we washed them all away, and then we resolve not to do them again. And one of the ways that I sometimes use as a kind of a model of this is a dishwasher. So think of a dishwasher, you put the dishes in there, the dirty dishes in there, like our bad karma, and we turn it on and it goes through cycles. And the first cycle that it goes through, it washes off most of the obvious bad things. The second cycle, it comes back and it goes through and really gets at some of those more difficult things that have not yet been cleaned up. And then the third cycle, it comes back and it takes those and it just turns the dishes into a sparkling kind of a phenomenon. So that's a good role model that you can think of what might be happening in terms of purifying your own body. So Vajrasattva then, we've made our resolve, is pleased with my prayers and replies, your delusions are now cleared away and you are purified. So we need to accept that we are now purified. With delight, Vajrasattva and Vajratopa then dissolve into me through the top of my head. I then become Vajrasattva and Vajratopa. Boundless light radiates out, filling the entire universe, transforming all phenomena into the perfect Buddha field of pure joy. So it's a little bit like a heaven in most religious traditions, but it's not considered to be that here. All sentient beings are transformed into Vajrasattva and Vajratopa. So we visualize now all sentient beings, not only the people, but also animals and other things on the planet and even beyond our planet to other places in the universe or multiverse where there might be beings that still existent. So all sentient beings are transformed into Vajrasattva and Vajratopa. Sounds are the resonance of the mantra, and all thoughts are the spontaneous display of wisdom. And so those are body, speech, and mind as a part of that. And that's a good way to help in your ordinary practice, is thinking of those as body, speech, and mind. The sentient beings, all sentient beings are in fact transformed into a Buddha form. And then the sounds are all forms of mantra. And then all thoughts are the wisdom aspect of that. So that's a very common way in terms of Tibetan Buddhism of viewing those things. Vajrasattva and Vajratopa dissolve then into me. I dissolve into the mantra, which dissolves into the Hung at my heart, which dissolves from the bottom up into emptiness. So that's the dissolution process. It's very fairly common in most of these kinds of practices. And so we just dissolve it down from the top down to the heart, and then up from the bottom of our body up to the heart. And then it dissolves from that into emptiness. Sometimes it's a little more complicated than that. So you've got a lotus, a disc, or even two discs, and then you've got the mantra circling around the outside, standing upright around the outside of the disc, and then you've got the Hong, or whatever letter is associated with that particular figure. And then up above that, there may be some other things, little marks. This one has a partial one, and we looked at before. So there's that part where it comes up here, and then there's a circle, and then in some of them there is a little kind of a squiggly line that comes up as a part of it too. So it's all dissolving into emptiness. Poof. And then we just stay in that calm state. We meditate without thoughts as long as you can. Deep breath. Excuse me. If other kind of thoughts do come back up, take a deep breath. Let them go. Just wash them back out of your body. It's mind. And you continue with that as long as you can. And then again, you arise as Vajrasattva and Vajratopa. And through the virtue of this practice, may I attain the enlightened state of Vajrasattva for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's the fourth of those reliances. So we rely on them in order to benefit all sentient beings. So that's the bodhicitta part of it, and it's the mind of enlightenment. But the bodhicitta includes both the bodhisattva commitment as well as the idea of the ultimate. So we have both ultimate and relative being a part of that coming together. And then the dedication, we recite, by the merit of this practice, may I attain liberation for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that's kind of a standard one. If there's another one that you prefer, feel free to use that as well. For post-meditation, we arise gently, leading your body in a meditative fashion as we did before. So then reciting the mantra 100 times, or a mala, for 100,000 without distraction is said to purify all past negative karma. Reciting it 21 times or 28 of the short one will purify the negative actions for the past day. So if you can do it 108 times, a mala of that, for 100,000 times without stopping, then that is said to purify everything. Now that's going to take a little bit of time to do that, but that is one of the ways that we can purify all of those. My advice generally is to do these practices daily. I think it's very helpful to reflect back on the past day, or if you're doing a practice in the evening, what happened during this day, what kind of things could I have improved on or avoided altogether, and then doing this practice to kind of wash those away. And so those are very helpful in developing our commitment, in developing our understanding and our practice. So there is in the text here of the book a short Vajrasattva practice. And so if you're unable to complete the practice as indicated above, you can do this very concise version. We recite the short mantra as many times as you can while visualizing Vajrasattva. And if you need it, a picture can be helpful. And then nectar purifying our body, speech, and mind. As we recite it, we just view it coming down and purifying our body, speech, and mind. Now you can use the Om Vajrasattva Hum or Om Bensasato A, either of those, or one long do the long version of that, the full mantra, and then one breath with the short mantra, and then in this particular case is an option to just then recite Om Ah Hum. In this particular practice, Om Ah Hum is the universal essence of all mantras. And so in that particular case, it is said that if we establish the mantra at least 3 times, so you could do 1 long or 3 long. 3 long is good, but you can do 1 long and then 2 short, and then this one, you can recite it as a complete mantra as Om Ah Hum. That's not a real common version, and some people would argue with that, I'm sure. But it has been said that the Om Ah Hum is as pure as all mantras, and so that is a possibility. And then in this case, we also then say the following prayer followed as the dedication. May all the breaches and transgressions of samayas are vows or commitments, both my own and those of all beings, be purified. So we're asking that they, not only ours be purified, but all beings be purified. From now until we reach the very heart of liberation, may our samaya be thoroughly and utterly pure. So we're trying to develop this sense of purity, not only in us, but for all sentient beings in whatever realms they may exist as a part of that. And so that concludes that part of the practice here. So those are things that I think are very helpful and part of what we are doing in the practice. So Vajrasattva is very, very important. As I said before, I like to do that at the beginning of my practice every day, and it is an important thing to do. Now, next week then we'll go on and continue with the uncommon preliminaries, and we'll go into the 4th one of these, which is the mandala offerings. So please email me, let me know if you have any questions that you'd like answered, and I will reply either directly to you or reply during one of our sessions if that is something that I think is useful, can be useful to a variety of people. And then, in the meantime, abide softly and deeply in pure awareness with loving kindness, compassion, for all beings, always and always. Thank you very much.